Okay, it looks like we're live.
Excellent, thank you. And Mike, I'll turn it over to you and support you any way you'd like for facilitating.
Oh wow, nothing like being live on TV to really start a public meeting, right? Well, first of all, it's really good to see everybody. I just want to acknowledge this is such a weird time. I'm in these types of meetings all day long with my coworkers, and it is a delight to see a lot of gay people together on a Zoom conference. It's really nice to see everyone. And it's been a while, Danielle, so really nice to have you back. I think I should probably just go ahead and jump into our topics, because who knows how long we can all tolerate this, being on camera with each other. First, do I ask for public comment, Gretchen, or how does that work?
Thank you for checking on that. We have not received any comment to date. And I'm going, which if we had, I would have been able to share it and read it at this moment. And I will continue to peek at my email to see if anything comes in.
Great, then I think our next agenda item is just to approve the minutes from last time. Did everyone receive the minutes? And do we have any motions to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as shared by Gretchen in the email.
I can second that.
This is where you all unmute. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Cool. Well, our next agenda item was related to the survey of shelter services. Gretchen, do you have enough?
Just a short one to say that I've again not completed it. I think most of you might know by now that when the pandemic began a couple of months ago, I was assigned to start to work on issues related to our unsheltered neighbors and homelessness and these kinds of topics. And I didn't sense that it was a good time to pivot and do a survey on these topics. There's been a lot of focus on the immediate needs and challenges related to COVID suppression. So I haven't yet started it. I kind of have it on my calendar and I think about it every few days and think about, okay, should I go ahead and start surveying? And I think probably pretty soon, but just wanted you to know I haven't completed that yet, but I also haven't forgotten about it. In the meantime, it's been great to continue to develop new and increased relationships with people who work at services and shelters. So I think that'll help me when I do execute it.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Gretchen? Yeah, I agree. It's a hard time to get kind of, people are dealing with the moment at hand, so it makes sense to hold for a little bit. Has anybody on the call heard of concerns from unsheltered folks, particularly LGBTQ unsheltered folks? And, does anyone have any knowledge of places where we might want to do outreach, or do we think that right now is a time when people are probably pretty focused on pandemic issues and maybe not this as much? So hearing none, I think we'll just wait and see then on that particular issue. And thanks for keeping up on it, Gretchen. The next topic was our discussion from last time on the task force brochure. So we have a brochure that's already created, and what I did was made some edits to the second page of the brochure, if you want to scroll down, Gretchen, to add an area where we could talk about LGBT groups in Salem. And our idea last time in the task force meeting was that we might want to keep that list of groups on the City of Salem website, because groups often change their contact information and things of that sort, and they go in and out of being in existence. So this was, the idea here was just that I added a box to the brochure that says that there are groups in Salem, and that we would put a list on the City of Salem website, as we discussed last time. That's about as far as I've gotten on this work, unfortunately. But I think this is a good time to discuss that idea more and kind of get next action steps for getting that list together. And I just welcome people's comments and thoughts.
I think it's important to make sure that we don't have dead links in the where we're keeping that on the website, because there's been a lot of them throughout the years that have come and then gone, and nothing else has happened. And I mean, I saw it last year published that, you know, Salem had, I don't know if it was published or someone referred to it in a speech or something, that there's a TG support network in Salem. That thing's been defunct since before I moved here 7 years ago. So the fact that that was still getting quoted is just kind of silly. So we just need to make sure that whoever's in charge of that is actually checking once in a while to make sure that they're relevant links. Otherwise, I think this is good rather than trying to print that off all the time. And maybe that's something that this task force needs to be keeping on top of. You know, myself or anyone else in the task force.
Yeah, last time, Danielle, we kind of talked about that being a function of the task force to keep that list of resources updated, and to that, you know, kind of in combination with the awareness task force, which has taken over the liaison for HRC, that both the awareness task force doing the liaison work would definitely pay attention to that, but then also the LGBTQ rights task force, that we would review those links every so often to make sure that they were current.
I think Byron has raised his hand to want to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on that note, like, I was curious about what our plans were for auditing this brochure in particular, and just making sure that information remains accurate, that we, sometimes there's a place here where we're planning on including a link to wherever we're hosting this database of different groups. Like what do we want to commit to as far as auditing the brochure and keeping this updated?
I know I would want to look at it with some regularity, maybe every 6 months to 12 months. Byron, I might have missed, my phone buzzed and I wanted to make sure it wasn't something for this meeting, so I was momentarily distracted. But I think like the staff person can be rereading the brochure every 6 to 12 months and making sure it's accurate and clicking on the links on the web page, and would welcome additional supports from the members as they surf the page to do that as well. Is that responsive to what you said?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I also think that our awareness task force should review all of HRC's brochures annually, not just this one. So we should probably add that to our work for the awareness task force. We did just do these last summer, so they're probably due for their first review. So I think that would be a really good idea as well.
I'll note that.
What about translation to Spanish and maybe Russian?
We do have them in Spanish, but at this time we don't have them in Russian, but we have them in Spanish. And so any edits then would run through the translation as well after we get them confirmed.
Okay.
Kind of thinking to Danielle's earlier point about how groups have kind of come and gone over the years. I wonder if we should have like, and I don't know the best way to organize this, but a little, maybe a subgroup or maybe this whole group could contribute toward getting those lists pulled together. And I think it's going to be a fair amount of legwork because, like, for example, I don't know how active PFLAG was extremely active last year, and I don't know how active they are this year, for example, as one organization. Or Capital Pride kind of pulled it out last year at the last minute because they had had some turbulence within their organization or I don't know if turbulence is the right word. I'm not involved with that organization, but just to the point that organizations do ebb and flow. And so I think as we develop the resource list, there's a little bit of legwork to find out how active they are and how active they're planning to be. So I don't know the best way to organize that work, but just thought I would throw that out there.
I know as a starting point before, we had the list that we'd created for the liaison program, and folks were taking a look at that to see if there were any to add or delete. And then I have a note saved from Tricarico with an ad of one. I don't know if everyone would like me to share the list I have. It's been a little while, so I could share the list that I have again and see if there's new ones. And then I don't know if folks would be interested in reaching out to check in with the groups, if we'd want to kind of organize that kind of conversation, or like maybe when I send out the list, I could invite, would anyone like to contact any of these? And that's a starting point. And then maybe I could take what's left that people don't grab. That might be one way to organize it.
I'm seeing a couple of thumbs ups.
I'm
Great.
happy to participate in that, reaching out. I would love to be able to go visit some of these groups. I don't know how soon that'll actually happen, but count me in.
Great. I'll send the list to everyone, invite your additions and deletions, and invite you to let me know which groups you'd like to visit. And maybe we'll set a date. Like if you let me know by, maybe a week or something, I can put it in the email. Then I can just double check that we don't have 5 people all wanting to go to the same group. And so then that way I can sort of organize it and then say, okay, great. Well, looks like we're going to have Mike see these and Danielle see these, etc. And so if that sounds good, I'll go ahead and do that. And if someone doesn't want to participate, that's okay, of course. I don't know if there's anything else on that subject. Mike, I thought the brochure ad looked great. It makes sense to me. You found a way to fit it in there and point people to the dynamic site.
I definitely think we can give these brochures a look and the awareness task force too, and we can kind of make changes. I'm not sure that I'm in love with where I put it, but we can move things around, certainly.
I had a thought on the brochure, and I have to put my glasses back on again. Right here where
Danielle, I think you may have cut out.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I apologize here. My computer audio wasn't working, and I actually had to set up my radio broadcast stuff, my remote broadcast stuff, and I did it so quickly that things are not fully seated. So sorry. Anyways, the sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination is prohibited in the city of Salem. It refers to Salem Revised Code. I don't know if we want to add anything from the changes that were made last year. Kind of update that so that clarifies that, or if we even think it's worth it, because I mean, while it's important changes, it was more of a effect of cleaning up the city code so it was in compliance. It wasn't really a policy change necessarily. So I don't know if we want to do that or not.
I could see something like it was updated in 2000 and whenever it was 19, for example, and that might convey that council's more recent commitment to Chapter 97. That might be one approach.
I mean, even if it's just a very small reference. But yeah, I think referring to the fact that this wasn't something that was just done in 2002 and then, we wrote about it in a flyer, but that there's a continuance of that work.
Great, I made a note, and Mike, I can offer a sentence for you. Sorry, I think I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I like that idea. Does anyone else on the commission have any other comments about it, or should we just roll forward with it?
What about that new bias hotline that came into effect with the new law? Should we include that on the brochure?
Tricarico, we may. I think my short answer is I don't see why not, and yes. I think there's some conversations to be had around helping to not confuse people. I would hate for people to feel like they have to call two numbers and share a difficult situation twice.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, so I think we have some thinking through to do of how it all fits together, but I agree. I think that's a good add.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, go ahead.
Maybe we can ask Lieutenant Aguilar about that. How that is connected to the HRC, if at all. If she thinks that'd be confusing, her perspective might be useful here.
I think you're right. I had a fairly lengthy conversation with the staff at the Department of Justice that's going to be staffing the hotline, and kind of explored some of those questions, but they were in more of the beginning stage of setting things up. And we both just kind of acknowledged that those questions are there and aren't sure yet of what the answers would be. They're going to be guests at our next Human Rights Commission meeting. They wanted to kind of come and listen to a meeting. And then I think after that, that'd be an opportunity for them and us and Lieutenant Aguilar and all of us to kind of get our heads around, okay, what questions do we have and how do we make this as supportive as possible to people in the community?
Perfect. We can ask them when they come to visit them.
Maybe. I don't think they'll be prepared yet because they're still
okay.
wanting to kind of get information. I think they're still kind of learning who we are, who the other groups are, and all of that. So I think their thought was come and view and get a sense of it and then have the conversation.
Okay.
So maybe like coming back to like a July or August meeting might make sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's just based on the conversation I had with the person a little while ago from Department of Justice.
I was also going to mention, Tricarico, that all of the brochures list contact information for for reporting discrimination. So we could probably come up with consistent language. If we wanted to include that number, we should consider coming up with consistent language and putting it on all the brochures for HRC in addition to LGBTQ.
Yes, absolutely.
So it doesn't, I'm not hearing further comment on the brochures, but what I would suggest is that if you get a chance to look at it later, since it's in your email, and want to send any comments to Gretchen about any of the specifics in the brochure, then we can take a look at that as well. And super open to changing it up, moving things around.
I think it looks really good, Mike. Just a couple of things I was talking about before, but otherwise I think it looks great.
Cool, cool. That was the meat of our agenda today. I guess now is the time where we could invite any member remarks or announcements. And I don't have any off the top of my head, but does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Gretchen, are we talking about the stuff we've been emailing back and forth, how it's connecting with the trans group? Are we talking about that in this meeting or the other meeting? I mean, I should probably just share it anyway, but.
You feel free to go ahead, but
Okay.
I had understood that for the human rights meeting coming up this Tuesday.
So there was a mention of using an equity lens. Sorry, my computer's a little bumpy. Using an equity lens for anytime the city is engaging in a contract with any business. And I've come across a couple really good resources for that I'm going to share with the main group and try to get more information about how they could help us. But I also connected with basically a trans support group that does these calls on how to lead equitably during a pandemic. So I can send that to Gretchen and share it with you all because they're really, really cool. They're a really great resource. And the leader actually served on the Portland Human Rights Commission. He is a trans business owner who specializes in supporting trans people in the workplace. Really cool stuff. So it's kind of just a great resource. And they're also willing to talk to us about some of the things that we've been looking at, like the sheltered status, that being defined in our bylaws somewhere. So it's just kind of a cool connection. I'm going to share more details at the main meeting, but I thought y'all would want to know. And that way Gretchen can share the contact information.
Kariko, out of curiosity, what's the name of the organization?
Oh, thank you. It's Rhodes Perry Consulting. Rhodes Perry is the person heading this. You could probably Google that and find all this great information, but they do meetings every Monday on Zoom, which we all know how to do, of course. So it's a great opportunity to connect with other people that are doing this kind of stuff. And I don't know, I really enjoy them. So I thought I'd share.
Like a crazy man with my mute button. Were any other announcements?
Yeah, well, I don't have any announcements, but I had a question. And first of all, I just want to say I'm glad to be back involved with this group. Kind of got a little distance from the commission after November, but and then this came up. So the pandemic. So I missed y'all and I missed finding out what was going on. So I hope everyone's doing well. I've been kind of out of the loop because I've been pretty much isolating and I've been running a radio station from home, which is unusual in itself. But I was wondering from Gretchen if there were any updates on and maybe you said this earlier, but have there been any incidents reported in the last few months?
I have
Yeah.
not had very many things reported in the last couple of months. I haven't had any that relate specifically to the pandemic. We've been hearing that both statewide and nationally, we're seeing an increase in instances of hate that are specific into COVID, you know, but I have not personally received any of those reports in through the Human Rights Commission. I've had a couple of phone calls from people in the community on different topics, some folks bringing in topics that we've talked about or helped on before and some clarifications of things, but no new reports of concerns of discrimination that I've received.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. We've tried to keep all of those lines open. You know, I can continue to get phone calls and emails and, you know, even though the city hall front door is closed at the moment, we've remained open for business and still able to provide all of those services and talk with people. But yeah.
Gretchen, in the past, when you had physical offices, did you get very many drop-ins? And is there a concern that folks who might not have access to phone or other means of contacting you may not have a way to get a hold of you?
That's always a good question. And we would occasionally get a drop in, although I don't have a number. I might say occasionally. Maybe once every 2 to 3 months or so, that might be an estimate. And yeah, that is always a concern, you know, is about telephone access or email access or those kinds of things. I am grateful to the organizations like the Arches Day Center. And I've also clarified, you know, other nonprofits like Northwest Human Services have the ability to assist a person with making a call or accessing a service. We were looking into that right as things were beginning to close down at the city because we were recognizing what is the Wi-Fi access availability, for example, for a person who's depending on open public Wi-Fi access. And so I was learning about the different places where people might be able to go to get connected to a service. But yeah.
Thank you. Any other announcements or remarks or questions? So it's an unusual time, and I think we're in kind of a wait and see. You know, typically we've been engaged around Capitol Pride. Who knows if Capitol Pride is going to be something this year? But if that event happens, I would imagine that HRC as a whole would want a table there, and we would want members of this group to participate again as we did last year, which was really cool. It was fun in the booth all day with all of y'all, many of y'all. And then of course, Trans Day of Remembrance is not until November. So hopeful that we can have that event as we've done for a few years now as well, pending all that's going on in the world. But for now, I don't think I have anything else. And unless we have other announcements, I think we can look to adjourn.
Quick question. Does anyone know the status of Capitol Pride this year? If they've made a decision on the event or if they're still watching to see?
I don't know for
Right.
sure.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I just said I don't know.
No. I don't know if this is something that they will do or any other organizations. I don't know if this is something that the city would want to do, maybe the task force or the commission. So, you know, I work for Mano a Mano in partnership with Piccoon, and they did a big May Day rally. They do it every year at the Capitol steps, and of course they couldn't do it this year. So it was done online. It was a Zoom meeting that was put onto Facebook Live. We broadcasted on our radio station live. It went over really well, actually. We had a surprising amount of people tune in for that. And I think maybe we should be on the lookout for something like that, or kind of keep it in the back pocket in case we decide that we want to do something towards that effect, or maybe if we need to do something to that effect for Trans Day of Remembrance, if there's a second wave that's coming through at that point or not. Just it was actually fairly successful.
I don't see anything on their Capital Pride Facebook about Capital Pride. So
They, even in the good years, Capital Pride usually didn't update much on that until the end of June, it seemed like. So
exactly. Well, it looks like they didn't have their meeting in May, and they'll probably have their next meeting in June. So yeah, I don't know. So
I'd be willing to check into Capital Pride, and if they're doing like a Zoom meeting or something, I could pop in, and report back to the group if it works for me. If not, maybe a member, and maybe I could through Gretchen email to see if other members might want to kind of check it out. I think your idea, Danielle, of doing something virtual is really compelling. Especially if people are still stuck at home at the time. For LGBTQ people in particular, times like this can be so isolating. And if we can do something in cooperation with Capital Pride or help them get the word out as a task force, I think that would be a really good use of our time.
Yeah, I agree that a virtual event would be really cool, and I would definitely want to see at least someone from the task force involved, or maybe we work on that together. We're doing a lot of virtual stuff at work, so I'm learning a lot about how to do virtual events. And wow, it's a lot, but I definitely would be willing to help out, since it seems like one of those things that's certainly easier with lots of help, right?
And I'd just like to say I'd be open to jumping in and assisting with organizing an online event as well.
So how about this? I'll take the get the ball rolling with the communication to the Capital Pride group and find out the details of the date and send it to Gretchen, and those who would want to go to one of their meetings can go. Does that sound like a good plan? And then we can talk about it at next LGBTQ rights.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Anything else we should touch on tonight?
I don't know of anything. Again, I've been a little away from this group for a little bit, so I'm kind of just getting back up to speed, but I can't think of anything else at this particular moment, other than just recognizing that, there's probably a lot of, I've heard stories about, domestic abuse has, risen during, the whole stay at home order, and a lot of very frustrated people. When people are underfunded, underemployed, unemployed, and financially unstable, bad things happen and people get frustrated and they take it out in lots of different ways. So just keeping our ears open, I think, is really important right now. That's all I got.
Thanks, Danielle. It's nice to have you back. Really nice. I think hearing no more comments, I think we are good to adjourn for the evening.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. Good to see
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Good
Thanks,
seeing
everyone.
everybody.